Hi everyone, Grandmaster Ben Finegold here with video number 2 from the Pro Chess League last night. I'm less tired now than my last night video, so maybe this analysis will make more sense. Well, unfortunately for you, this game wasn't very interesting, but if there were rules in place about what move you could offer a draw, then the arbiters and organizers would have thrown us a parade because after I made my 30th move, we agreed to a draw. So we really know how to follow those Sophia rules. Okay, I guess those aren't the Sophia rules, but anyway, maybe there's a woman named Sophia somewhere, and those are her rules, so I still wasn't technically incorrect. All right, so I'm playing Alexey Dreev, one of the strongest players I've ever played. I guess Etienne Bacro and MVL are higher rated than Dreev, although I'm not sure if I've played a FIDE-rated game against anybody else higher rated than Dreev at the time. As I've said in previous videos, I've played a lot of the players in the world who were in the top, except they weren't in the top when I played them. They were, like 3 years old. So I've played FIDE-rated chess against Anand, Nakamura, Caruana, Gelfand, Elvest, Sarawan, and many other Kamsky, and many other players who at some point in their careers were in the top 10, but they weren't in the top 10 when I played them. In fact, some of them weren't in the top 500. Anyway, so I'm black against Dreev, and I didn't prepare for the game because I figured I'm going to lose, so why should I waste my time preparing? Okay, so Dreev played d4, and I decided if allowed I would play my silly check Benoni and get squeezed, but he played knight f3, so I can't really play c5 and e5. I play a lot of different openings with black, but if it's a 15-minute game, I might as well play the King's Indian. Okay, now this position, which I've had before, I basically know how to play one line with black, and he didn't let me play it, so it's a good thing I didn't prepare. So the line that I usually play with black against the normal c4 is I play c6, which is very unusual, knight c3, and now I play another unusual move, bishop f5, and the idea is to play knight e4 and trade those knights and open up my bishop. In fact, if you remember my video from last night, if you've already watched that one, where I'm playing Keaton Kirwa, I was white in a King's Indian Benoni type game, and he also played bishop f5 with the idea of knight e4 in a totally different position. So, okay, so that's what I usually do, and I've probably had that 3 or 4 times. Dreev played b3, so that's the end of my prep. Looking at the game later with my chess base and reference database and all that stuff, it seems that c5 is the most common move. I thought about c5. Now, when my opponent played b3, I figured since he played it quickly, this is like his prep, this is what he normally does, this is something he knows well. So I have to play a move that's not very common and not let him play 10 more quick moves, especially since I don't know it, and I don't want to waste a lot of time. When you're playing 15-minute chess, one of your goals is to have a lot more time than your opponent, which I achieved this game. In fact, I think I achieved it in every game except the first one. I think in the first game we were about the same all the time. In the next 3 games, I was usually ahead on the clock. Okay, so I played a5. I like to play a5 when my opponent plays b3 in almost any opening. So now I was very happy because Dreev thought for a long time, so obviously he wasn't familiar with a5. And he played the move c4, and I was happy to play c6 because this is now looking sort of like what I usually play with the insertion of the moves b3, a5, which I don't think is a big deal. Okay, so knight c3, bishop f5. And as I said earlier, I've had this position without the pawn moves on the queen side. So if white's pawn was on b2 and black's pawn was on a5, this is the position I was looking at with you earlier. Okay, bishop b2, I played knight e4, which is the point. If I get to move again, I'll trade knights on c3 and put my bishop on e4. That's sort of the normal way of playing. So he played knight h4, which is a common idea for white. Kicking my knight out, I trade, and now my bishop's attacked. It's funny, every bishop move has been played, g4, e6, d7, and c8. And mine is the least common. So bishop e6 is the most common. That's what I usually do in this position. But I didn't see the point since his pawn's already on b3. I've probably had this position with the pawn on b2 and my pawn on a7. Then bishop e6 at least attacks his pawn on c4. Here bishop e6 doesn't attack the pawn on c4, so I don't know. I didn't really want my bishop on e6. So I played bishop, so I played bishop to d7. Pushed the wrong arrow there, sorry to scare you. I scared myself more. And now, obviously, my knight can't go to d7 or c6 since my own pieces are there. And I'm going to play knight a6 most likely, and then either play knight b4 or knight c7, depending on the situation. Well, Dreev stopped knight a6 by playing queen to d2. Now his queen and bishop are lined up on my a pawn. So if I play knight a6, he just takes my pawn. Okay, so I played a4, and he thought a while and played b4, which I expected. And then I played knight a6. Okay, now he played sort of slowly. Obviously, white has a nice space advantage, although black's really solid. And these are the kinds of positions I think black does well in quick chess and in blitz chess, but not in slow chess. In slow chess, white can slowly build and get his advantage going, and you don't really have time to figure out everything when there's no time on the clock. And if you decide, I'm going to figure out everything and figure out all the tactics and figure out the positional strategy, that you could get into time trouble. Of course, I wouldn't want to have black against Magnus Carlsen here, although I wouldn't want to have black against Magnus Carlsen anyway. So, okay. He played a3, which probably isn't very accurate. Obviously, my knight on a6 doesn't make a lot of sense, so I played knight c7. And he played e4 pretty quickly. Looks like he has a nice center. And I was thinking about playing e5, d5, c5, and b5 here. I figured I had to play one of them. I looked at e5 a lot, and I couldn't get it to work. I thought he'd play either f4 or rook a d1, and I didn't like my weak d pawn and the fact that my d7 bishop could get under attack. d5 looks like it just loses a pawn, and c5 also at least loses a pawn or gives me a bad position. So b5 it is. And I've played b5 in this opening more than once because it's not clear what white should do here. His pawn's hanging on c4, and if he trades, I could take with the knight or the pawn. Looks like they're both okay to me. Probably with the knight, because then I put pressure on d4 and his bishop. Okay, so he played c5, which I expected, and I played d5, blocking it all up. And I thought if he allowed me to trade pawns in the center, my knight could go to d5, and my bishop could go to e6, and his d4 pawn is weak. So that seems like it's pretty good for black. Computer also thinks I can play bishop e6 here with the idea of playing bishop c4. I didn't really want to analyze bishop e6, d5. Probably just good for black because I can take on c3. And also bishop e6 weakens my c6 pawn. So I don't know, d5 to block it up seemed like the sensible move. Yeah, bishop e6 looks good now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, so he played e5, and that sort of stifles my bishop and knight, stifles all my pieces. White has a huge space advantage. Unfortunately, he's risking that the position gets totally blocked up, which is actually what happened. And also his bishop on c3 isn't the best bishop ever. Now, these kind of positions are difficult to analyze with an engine because whenever somebody has more space, the engine just says winning, 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 +1, +0.8, because it likes all the space. So lots of King's Indian positions and lots of positions like this was a King's Indian, it really likes white. Although it's really hard for white to do anything. I played f5, giving my opponent a big think, and he actually surprised me here. I thought it would get all blocked up, and eventually my opponent would try to play either h4, h5, or g4. But after thinking a long time, Alexey decided to trade on f6, which is okay. And I took back. And the computer says black is just fine here because it's very hard for white to do anything, and there's a possibility of massive trades on the e-file. Of course, our bishops aren't very good, but that's okay. As my dad used to say, both sides stand badly. Okay, he played queen d3, and that's really interesting strategical move from a strong player that'll really, give you a good chess lesson here. So strong players like Alexey, they try to improve their pieces, and some pieces are bad forever, some are bad temporarily, some look bad, but they could be good. So pieces like the bishop on c3 look like they're bad forever. Of course, if you were a dreamer, you would get your bishop maybe to d6. That seems like a nice square. And Alexey must have been thinking that when he played queen d3, now he can play bishop to d2, to f4, to d6 is his idea. It's going to take a long time. He has to watch out for g5. Okay, problem is, even when the bishop gets to d6, I can kick it with knight e8. Okay, so I played queen e7, so my rook on a8 could get to the e-file. And I decided I didn't want him to play bishop f4, so I played knight e6. And he pinned my knight, and I unpinned my knight, and he played f4. Okay, So f4 is pretty committal, but on the other hand, I don't want him to play f5. Then I figure I'm just losing. So I played f5. Okay, it's getting more blocked up. Now, I've given him the e5 square for his knight, but that's okay because I'll take it when it goes there. Okay, and that's what happened. Okay, and I actually don't have to take. I could play queen e7, but okay. And yeah, my knight on e6 is really strong, and even if he takes with one of his pawns, his bishop still isn't great on d2. It's better than it was, but still. It's so blocked up, it's very hard to win for either side. Okay, took with the rook. I said, let's trade all the rooks. And I played h5 because I thought g4 was his only break, so now it doesn't seem like he can do anything. Rook e1, trade the rooks, rook e8, trade the rooks. And originally, when he played queen e2, I was like, oh, if I trade the rooks, I'll take with the queen and infiltrate with the queen. Queen c7, queen b8, and his queen will be all up on my grill. But then I was like, wait a minute, so what? What could his queen do? His queen can go to c7 and b8 all day. Now, I've been thinking for the last 4 or 5 moves, based on my previous chess experience, that I want my knight to be on a good square, and I actually like the e6 square, but now that we've played f4 and f5, I didn't like the e6 square so much. And to me, it was pretty clear that knight e4 is a pretty good square, although it's very hard to get there. But then I realized when he played queen e2 that if my rook wasn't on e8, I could play knight e8, knight f6, knight e4. Okay, I don't even have to go to e4. I could just threaten to go to e4. Okay, and that's a really good square for my knight. If somehow he trades, we'll have opposite bishops, and well, his bishop's just terrible on d2. So I wanted to play knight e8, so I got my rook off of e8, took with the queen, and I played knight e8. And now I don't see how anybody can do anything. Even if my knight goes to e4, taking it should lead to a draw, and not taking it should lead to a draw. And the problem is, if somehow my queen infiltrates, I'm not sure how, gets to a2 and starts taking things, he'll have a lot of perpetual check chances as well, since my king has no defense, really. And my bishop on d7 is pretty ridiculous. So since all of our pieces are bad, here we agreed to a draw. I offered a draw. The only thing I'm proud of this game, other than drawing a good player, is I played really quickly. When the game ended, I had about 9 minutes, and my opponent had about 5 minutes. So I didn't just sit there and think forever and make silly moves. I played silly moves quickly. You can't stop me from playing silly moves. And I turned the engine on after the game, of course. If I turned the engine on during the game, I would play better. And it said I was slightly to clearly worse, like the first 17 moves or so. And then once we got to move 18, 19, it said it was about equal, and this is completely equal because nobody can really do anything. So that was a pretty good defense for me, and after drawing a slightly low-rated player in the first round, I drew a much higher-rated player, and we tied the match up. At this point, after this round, the score was 4-4, and it was a really interesting match. Okay, stay tuned later today for Game 3 in the match, where there were lots of up and downs. That was the craziest game of the match for me. This is Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Please like and subscribe. Please consider a donation by going to our website of the Chess Club and Scholastic Center of Atlanta, www.atlchessclub.com, and have a look at our website. You can follow me on Twitter, Chess Club and Scholastic Center of Atlanta, and on Facebook, same thing. And, well, more videos are coming. Bye, everyone.